I never questioned vaccines. Even when the COVID vaccine came out, I was mildly encouraged, although I was already skeptical because I'd known that they'd been trying to develop coronavirus vaccines and it was failing at the animal level. I can't remember, monkeys or apes were dying more viciously if they got vaccinated than if they weren't, something called antibody-dependent enhancement. So I had concerns around the COVID vaccines, and then that just led me down the path. Once I started seeing injuries pop up around me, people reaching out to me because they were injured, some of them disabled, and then I was looking at VAERS, looking at other stuff, and I just found horrors everywhere. The data was screaming how toxic and lethal this mRNA vaccine was, let alone my discovery and writing and research on shedding. So I went deep into COVID vaccines, but then I started to read books on the history of vaccines, and I found that these myths that were taught in medical school, that they're myths, they're not evidence-based. This constant refrain, and you heard it in the hearings, about how smallpox vaccine rid us of the smallpox epidemic. That is completely false. The opposite is true. If you really look at the history of smallpox, the vaccine made things worse. And yet, our history was written as if the vaccine cured that epidemic. Same thing with polio. It's another narrative and myth that we rid ourselves of polio. There's more polio-like paralysis in the world today than there was during the polio epidemic. And we know why, because it wasn't polio. It was mass use of pesticides and DDT that was causing paralysis in all of these kids. And you could see the spikes and waves. And also most of the childhood illnesses, the deaths from them had literally plummeted to near zero by the time the vaccines for those diseases came out. And yet, what are we told historically? That the vaccines eradicated child. No, it didn't. We know that now. It was personal hygiene, sanitation, water purification, getting rid of slums and the pestilence in some of the inner city neighborhoods that fostered and breeded these epidemics. And so vaccines had very little to do with it. And so you ask me where I am now. So that's one thing. The overstating of the efficacy and the miracle of these vaccines is a myth. Then there's the other side to it, which is the burying of adverse events and the toxicity of these vaccines. They go hand in hand, right? It's safe and effective, right? So they propagandize both, and the pharma does this around every product. But the safety of these vaccines has never been shown. In fact, it's been suppressed. This idea that there's no link between vaccines and autism is laughable. Just laughable. There's immense amounts of data. There's no other explanation for the massive skyrocketing rise in autism rates and ADHD and allergies. They all parallel the explosion in the childhood schedule. So for anyone to say that there's no link, there's plenty of links. They've done studies comparing unvaccinated and vaccinated kids. There's a recent one in the last few weeks showing much higher rates amongst the vaccinated for all of those important diseases. So we know that there are really negative consequences to vaccination, but you never hear of them, right? All you hear is how effective they are and how safe they are, and it's an easy decision. Anyone who questions it, there's something wrong with them. They don't know the science.